We are delighted to have four really interesting companies presenting tonight, and those would be Active Energy Group, Open Orphan, Emmerson, and Incanthera. Each of our companies gets roughly 18 minutes to present their investment case, and then we open the floor to questions for 10 minutes. Our first company of the evening, this evening, is Active Energy Group. They're listed on AIM in the alternative energy sector and have a market cap of roughly £38 million. I think they're a fascinating company. They describe themselves as biomass-based renewable energy and forestry management business. AEG are currently commercializing a biomass product which can be mixed with coal in an existing coal-fired power station. The coal switch reference plant is in Lumberton, North Carolina. I'm sure we're going to be hearing a lot more about Lumberton in the next half an hour or so. I'm delighted to welcome Michael Rowan, CEO, and Andrew Diamond is CFO, and they're going to talk us through the company tonight. Welcome both.
Good evening, and thank you everybody for joining tonight's call, and thank you, Donald. I'm Michael Rowan, I'm CEO, and Andrew might want to say a couple of words.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. Good to have me on. Thank you very much. I joined Active Energy in January of this year, so fairly new to the company, but an exciting time as we'll take you through.
Right, so turning through to the presentation, I'm just going to run through the rudiments of the business model as it is, and then explain to you the components of the business. So the feature now for the company is around the development of coal switch and the commercialization of coal switch. Coal switch is a form of biomass, which I'll come on to in a second. But what we're looking at behind the business is obviously how to develop and commercialize that properly. There'll be three key components to what we describe as biomass revenues. The first is going to be direct sales of coal switch to the market, particularly to major offtake customers. That can include major oil traders or commodity traders, or it could also include power stations directly and coal mining companies or other potential biomass buyers. The second stage of the development, we'll be looking at licensing out the technologies that we're developing. Right now, we've spent a number of years developing the technology, and we're in the final throes of construction at Lumberton itself, which will have the proven version of how to create the product. That's presenting us with some exciting opportunities coming forward to us. And then finally, the other element to this is obviously the chance to sell the fuels to other potential partners and look at other derivative products that come off the back of it. Now, to make that business work effectively, there are a number of key components to it. You need to make sure that you've got feedstock and timber supplies, which are adequate in each relevant location you want to do. And one of the key things that we're focused on is looking at the exact ethnicity of its particular origins. And secondly, we obviously want to look at the services and technology division, which will complement those biomass revenues. The next page is obviously probably more important, which is what our immediate business focuses are. We're focused on what we call next generation biomass fuels. That's not the traditional white pellet. It is very much focused around a black pellet, or what we call an equivalent of a black pellet. That means that we're looking for a particular production process which is more environmentally friendly and is more environmentally aware, which means therefore that we are trying to minimize the use of fossil fuels in the production process, that we are focused very much on using residual feedstock sources, notably, for example, sawdust or wood chip or bark. And thirdly, we're focusing on a steam treatment process, which is very different to the underlying way that a white pellet is actually produced. Those three are key to the ethos to making the new pellet and remain our resounding principles that we're trying to work towards. We're obviously now looking to commercialize that, which takes me to the scalable fuel production facilities that I'm referring to there. We're building right now a 3-ton per hour plant, which will have the ability to expand up to a 5-ton an hour plant very quickly. And we're looking at expanding that production capacity in the near and medium term future, and then ultimately creating larger scalable facilities as well. We've had a number of interested parties who want to expand in that area, and that will be a focus for us. And then thirdly, we're looking at developing the IP and the production know-how to ensure that we can expand our knowledge and know-how in this area and expand it into the marketplace. Those are going to be key to the future for the business. What is coal switch? Well, in short order, it is a black pellet. If you look to the right-hand side, you can see a very sample of that pellet. It looks a little bit like licorice, if you like, but its key qualities are key principles that we've always found as developing in the fuel over the last 3 years. It has to fundamentally be able to co-fire with coal, which is what Donald mentioned at the outset. We're not looking necessarily to replace coal, but certainly complement coal and significantly reduce the emissions that are currently underway. We're trying to address there a key market. Coal is still a major constituent of power and electricity generation right now, and we need to be able to focus into that market, and particularly in North America, which is where we've noticed being key. The second key quality is it needs to be feedstock agnostic. I've made very clear earlier on that we are looking at waste revenues and waste residues as being the key for us, but we're looking at all sorts of waste, hardwood, softwood, that could be used in the process. That is also key to developing a fuel that is going to be easy to develop and easy to adapt. I've mentioned in passing that we create a fuel that is carbon neutral. We've done some testing on that so far. Its most attractiveness actually is also what it does in reduction of NOx and SOx and various other pollutants as well. But we are focused on trying to create a fuel that will be cutting emissions to a significant level. And finally, there's obviously another key element to this. We try to create a fuel which is hydrophobic, as in it can withstand getting wet and still keep its underlying qualities. And that is very different to what existing white pellet is about. We have developed that over time. It means it's much more easier to deliver, it's much more easier to develop, and it's much easier for the end customers to be able to use. Now, this process has taken many years in development, really, since 2017 to 2020. And obviously, we got our first customer in December last year with PacificCorp. I think since then and since early in this year, we've been getting more interest and more commercial conversations are ongoing. And I think that will see further development for the fuel and the opportunities. In very short order about the competitive analysis of coal switch, I wanted to give you a quick snapshot. If you look at this slide here, you can see the two real phrases to look at are, number one, the calorific value, the burn value, the heat value of the fuel. The fuel itself has an equivalence towards coal, which is why it's therefore easier to mix with coal, and it also has the same sort of density as coal. And those are two key qualities that make it very attractive for the coal-fired power stations to potentially look at as an alternative fuel. The real point is that we try and remove all the soluble minerals through the process, and also we're trying to ensure that we're creating a cleaner fuel, a sulfur-free fuel. Now, as you'll notice on this slide, and it's important to realize, existing white pellet is not as efficient as a fuel, and it has a less heat value, which means, therefore, that for your average customer, they're not going to get as much payment for their dollar. And that is very important to us. If we're able to match coal, we're very attractive to future customers. The base at Lumberton has been the heartland of the company for the last 2 years. A little map there on the left shows you exactly where we are. We're close to the major export ports of Wilmington and Newport and Leicester down in Savannah in Georgia. We've obviously part of the heartland, which currently makes white pellet in the same area, and major competitors do operate in the local vicinity. But we've chosen that facility for an exact reason. It's in the center of biomass production. The wood supplies are well established. The infrastructure to supply wood is easy to attain. And equally, from a transportation standpoint, there are regular supply routes across to Europe and even across to Asia. And we chose that for those very good reasons. Communications is good, and that's how the plant can develop. On page 8, I'm showing you quickly what the plant actually looks like. So on your left-hand side, you can see an aerial view of the plant itself. It's a 151-acre site with a 400,000 square foot facility. And we're building the first stage reactor just to the left-hand side of the plant there and developing it from there. As we expand the plant, I expect to be building bigger plants on the other site, but in different locations. But we are using that site as the core base. And it's fully permitted in order to get the plant up and running. And then we'll be able to expand with additional permits as we go forward. As I mentioned, we're in the heart of the lumber area of Northeast America, and therefore we obviously have established supply chain partners with us who can work to establish and give us feedstock and supply as required. It's sourced very locally. We don't like to drive too far away, within about 90 minutes from the site. And obviously we get a ready access to feedstock resources and waste resources at that. It's only about 70 miles to Wilmington Port, so it can be shipped down to port very quickly and very easily. On the right-hand side, you see a first engineering model of the plant as it looked like when we did the designs late in the year. This is obviously for a basic 3 ton an hour facility that can be expanded to a 5 ton an hour facility. All the equipment is now basically on site, and we have the option here to increase the production capacity of the plant going forward. As I said, the engineering and the planning is already well underway, and the focus for the last few months has been around getting this plant up and running, as we've disclosed earlier in the year. And these are some very simple photos of some of the work that's been hit underway. On your left-hand side is obviously the large-scale dryer that's been imported. You can see in the middle the kit that's been coming in situ, and you can see on the right-hand side how the plant is coming together in actual sheet steel form. That development is well underway. These photos are probably a couple of weeks old, and every week there is another stage of progress here. As you'll see from our regular Twitter page, if you actually access into it, you can see the progress that we've been making. The future of the business, obviously, as I said, is around expanding the revenue silos from that business. And we're looking at that in a number of ways. The United States and North America is going to be our immediate heartland and focus. And I've given on here a photograph of where the first delivery of fuel to the Pacific Core will occur. It's the middle of Utah. It's a coal-fired power station. It's supplying electricity onto the Midwest. And it's a key potential first client for us. But in addition to which, there are coal-fired power stations scattered everywhere in the United States, and we're looking at all of those market opportunities as well. Secondly, we've also had a number of international inquiries for the fuel over the last couple of years, but more interestingly, over the last 4 or 5 months, a number of international inquiries have come to the fore. For example, in the Far East, we've got regular dialogue with partners who are looking at potentially solving issues around empty fruit bunch and palm oil residue and waste, and equally from South America, from other waste residues that have come out of there. They're all opportunities to look at. They're all focused on ensuring that we can actually get the first fuel in production, and we can give people a proper design and a run through of that. I think when we get those moments done, it's a major landmark for us. In terms of the board itself, we've been rebuilding the team over the last 2 years. I'm CEO based in London, and Andrew is also based in London. The core directors are obviously based in London, but Jason Zimmerman is based out in Vancouver, and he's proving instrumental in helping introductions to us to the lumber industry in Canada and also in North America. We now have an active team operating in Lumberton itself. That is including a site manager and a number of employees, and we're expanding that team as fast as we can now. That team will expand to ensure that we can operate at a minimum on a 2-shift process in the not too distant future for the coal switch operations, and it'll complement any other activities we're doing on site for lumber or otherwise. In terms of where we are and in terms of the immediate goals, I think clearly our target has been to get the plant up and running and get the 3 ton per hour reference plant in operation. That will give us a chance to accumulate a mass of data and to show potential customers, both licensees and joint venture partners, how the plant can really operate. We really are very keen to show that we're using existing waste materials as one of the hearts and the core of the fuel itself. We've appointed obviously a great engineering partner in the form of Player Design, who have significant experience of building pellet plants around the world. And they've been instrumental in helping us over the last recent months, and are obviously looking and working with us as we expand the opportunity at Lumberton itself. But clearly the idea and the focus is on next generation renewable biomass fuels. And we believe that North America is where those first opportunities are going to arise. Let me pass over to Andrew to tell us some of our recent news and how it's developed.
Thank you, Michael. So the first quarter since I started at Active Energy it's been a busy one. In February, we announced that we were doing a balance sheet restructuring, whereby we got our convertible loan note holders £18.8 million worth to agree to either convert, which was £16.6 million worth, and the balance were then redeemed or eliminated. So we've managed to eliminate the entire balance for the CLN debt that we had on the balance sheet. At the same time, we were able to then remove the security that underpinned those notes, which again just frees up the company and its balance sheet then as to looking towards the future. At the same time, we went to the equity markets and we were able to do a fundraise of £7 million, whereby some of our existing shareholders contributed to the company, and we also had a couple of new shareholders coming into the company. In terms of how we intend to use those funds, obviously the majority of those funds is going to be spent on the completion of the plant, which Michael mentioned, the coal switch plant, which is under development in Lumberton at the moment. In addition to that, there's some facility upgrades that we need to do at the site itself. And lastly, we wanted to kickstart the engineering to be able to scale up the business once we are in production and we start to see the demand coming through for the product. So we wanted to be in place to do that and have done so. Thanks, Michael. So I just wanted to give a picture of what does our shareholder composition look like post the transaction. So Our existing shareholders before the transaction happened now own 39% of the company. The convertible loan note holders who elected to convert into equity hold 43% of the company. I think it's worth mentioning that a number of those note holders were also existing shareholders, so there's a lot of crossover there. And the new shareholders that came into the equity raise, the £7 million equity raise, now own 18% of the company. So in total, 3.9 billion shares in issue. But I think important to note, the balance sheet of the company has now been completely deleveraged with the removal of the convertible loan notes, and the security that underpinned those loan notes has now been removed. So certainly the company in a much better position as we come to this really exciting point where we start to get into production of cold switch. Thanks, Michael. And so what we have on this slide is just a view of the share price. Obviously, a lot of excitement when we made the announcement about deleveraging the company and the balance sheet restructuring in January. And then on the right-hand side, I just wanted to give a picture of our shareholder composition at the moment with our top 10 shareholders. You'll note that of those shareholders, the 10 make up roughly 70% of the total shareholding of the company. So a good balance between institutional and retail holders. And you'll note that there's one or two new names in our shareholders which haven't been there before, which is exciting, but also good to see that our existing shareholders have remained loyal with us, which is obviously pleasing. Thank you, Michael. Back to you.
Yeah. So in summary, I think AAG has reached itself a position for scale up. And I think that's the key message that you have to appreciate. There has a lot of background work being done over the last 2 to 3 years, and it's taken a lot of foundations to get the company in the current shape it is. We acquired Lumberton in 2019. It was a critical acquisition to make sure that we had a base in the right part of the United States. We've worked hard in terms of trying to get the permit award and getting the plant up and running. And clearly we've now got to that point where the plant is just about to start production. It's going to be a very exciting moment for the company. We've got the first order, and I think with the plant up and running and producing fuel in the not too distant future, we're going to be in a position of quite exciting times for the company. There is no doubt that obviously the political change in the United States has helped us, and it has helped us in a way that I didn't expect, and it's very encouraging. And I would say right now that we're having a very exciting audience that is very interested to see how the company will develop. I think the goals are going to be very clear for us: to build on the technology, to show how you can use the waste fuels and make it a biomass fuel of choice. And I can see also more time spent scaling up production to be able to deliver to potential clients. So now can I open it up to questions? I think we're done at 18 minutes, Donald.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. What an interesting company you have there, Michael.
Thank you, Donald.
Okay. Now it's entirely up to you. Should we start with this morning's announcement, or do you want to? Shall we go down the route of the reference plant? And
why don't I can start with this morning's announcement. As you may have seen this morning, we made a decision to go to NASDAQ OTC, which is the listing exercise we want to do to complement our activities. We've done that for two primary reasons, because as Andrew just highlighted a minute or two ago, we have a number of US holders on the register. They are desperately keen to support us in ways that will help diversify the register for us, and they were obviously keen for us to do that. But also, more importantly, as we've been talking to potential clients in the US, I think having a NASDAQ listing for us will seriously raise our commercial profile over there. So that's why we've been very keen to do it, Donald. It's a very exciting time.
Fantastic. Now, Gary May is interested in your reference plant. He wants to know, you keep telling us it's almost done. Is it the sort of, is building a plant like that not the sort of thing that you can say definitively from one day to the next that it's actually finished? Is that the issue? Will there forever be testing and pilots and so on going on?
No, I mean, I think very clearly, look, we're in the final throes of construction right now, which I'm expecting to be finished towards the end of this month. And we're on track to deliver the fuels to Pacific Core in Q2, as we've always said.
Q2 is a very broad
well, it's only the beginning
target, though.
We've always said to people it was going to be Q2, and it's on track to be in Q2, Donald.
So people are telling me that it's June. Would you agree with that? Have you said publicly June?
We haven't said publicly June, but we have obviously said Q2, and it's on track for that.
So you're still directing to Q2, and
yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So the intention is to get the fuel up and running, and then clearly that first plant is a watershed for us. It will give us a chance to demonstrate the fuels. I would expect then for us to be able, given the conversations we're currently having, to see an expansion of the commercial opportunities on the back of that, Donald. Clearly, the idea is to start supplying the fuels, not merely just to keep doing reference plants.
So Pacific Core are in there as your first potential client. Have you been having discussions currently with other potential clients?
Yes, we have been having conversations with other potential clients, particularly since we completed the fundraising in January, and people have become very aware of the construction activities we're doing in Lumberton.
Okay, here we go. Here's a brand new question, hot off the blocks for you, from a gentleman called Ben Sugarman. It's a tough question, but it's a fair one, I think. So let me pop this to you. What are the main questions or hurdles potential customers are raising with you about the coal switch product? So I'm sure that's one you must have heard before, but nonetheless, it is a real question.
No, it is a real question. At the end of the day, this is why it's so important to get the reference plant up and running. People want to take samples of the fuel and arguably test it for themselves so they can verify from their own analysis the actual potential content and the effects that actually has. The idea of that is so critical, and that's why we need to produce actual industrial sized concepts of the fuel as quickly as possible. That tends to be the biggest question we've had so far. And I think once they've tested it themselves, I think we're seeing an audience that's prepared then to put it into their own commercial activities. And I think that's the encouraging thing for us, Donald.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, in the previous interview you did with me, I spent some time going back over it before today. And you made a very interesting point that it's not just a 3 to 5 ton plant, which is where Lumberton is today, but you have plans for a 50 ton version, which is presumably a full commercial version. How much more can you tell us about that?
Well, I think right now what we've seen is the clear plan is that we would like to build a larger facility at Lumberton, and that will be our goal, clearly, as the first site. But we're also seeing, I think, since we even did that interview with you, a lot of interest from other potential partners who would also like to have bigger size scalable plants in operation and in production. So the answer is actually that we're very keen to move as quickly as we can from that first plant and to create a more scalable set of volumes for the fuel generally.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. People are talking, people are wanting more detail in terms of tests and so on. Have you really told us everything you possibly can in terms of times and deadlines and breakdowns and so on? Because it really is a focus for lots and lots of attention.
Andrew, why don't you answer that?
You've said it as many times as you can.
I've said it, but I'm
not sure there's too much to add, Michael. I think we've told we've shared with you what we've shared with the market right now, and as soon as we have more information, of course we'll share it.
Okay. Testing and building up the data is going to be key, Donald, to the equation, and that's what we're very excited about. Now we've got a machine that can produce the fuel in scale. We're going to be in a position where that is going to create new commercial opportunities.
Okay. Where do you see additional licensing opportunities emerging?
I see licensing opportunities will come both from within the US and generally beyond the US, internationally, as we said in our presentation. We have had regular dialogue with people in the last recent weeks in other countries and other territories, and I see the fact that a lot of them are going to want to move very quickly once the fuel is in production.
Okay. You mentioned that the Biden presidency turns out to be rather more favorable for your business than you expected. What did you mean by that? And give me an example or two.
Well, I think obviously the Biden presidency has changed the whole tenor of the way the US wants to approach renewable fuels and renewable technology. There's now going to be a much greater awareness of what they need to do and how they develop going forward. The fact that we appear as a homegrown tech in the United States is very useful. And the fact we're developing it in the United States is also a tremendous opportunity. So that really is why I think there's been a change of tenor of where we are. We believe that biomass will be part of that equation going forward. And actually the really exciting bit is that because the US doesn't have too much of an established white pellet industry, there is actually opportunity for a new generation fuel like ours in the black pellet to be able to create a new bridgehead into the marketplace. And that's why I'm saying we're getting a lot more interest from people who are genuinely engaged, who would like to see what this fuel could represent.
So what do you think the scale of the opportunity is in America in itself? So perhaps we should ask you for the scale of opportunity in America, and then broaden it out to the world?
Well, 30% of all US electricity right now is burnt in the United States from burning coal. So if nothing else, there's an opportunity there if we could just produce a small fraction of that market. There is still over 2,000 coal-fired power stations around the world. Forget the UK. The UK has sort of moved on a bit, but certainly around the rest of the world and rest of Europe, we see a huge opportunity there. Equally, in Europe itself, you've got an existing white pellet industry, which is also coming under more pressure to get a better set of fuels anyway. So we believe there's also a subset of the market that could be coming from that as well. So the idea is that there is a huge opportunity there for using it as a complement and ultimately an alternate to coal.
Okay. Mohammed Ishmael, he asks a very broad brush question, and he says, how are you adapting to green energy? So I don't know quite where he's coming from. I would have thought you were a form of green energy.
Look, biomass is part of the equation for green energy. If you look at the British government stats that came out when they did their paper in December, they clearly said that biomass still had to be part of the UK agenda. So I think in sense of how we're addressing green energy, we want to be part of the future equation of that. In terms of from our own consumption side, as I've mentioned earlier on, we're very keen on using waste resources and wherever possible, recycling that into fuels and creating the pellets from that. We've got a very large facility. There's a lot of things that we can do at the site in very simple terms, whether it's solar power to assist actually energy demand in the process and for the fuels itself, or just planting more trees on the facility to help increase log burns, or looking at new energy crops. There's a lot of things that we're going to be looking at going forward, but I would say that the whole environmental agenda is part of the equation and part of the solution for AEG.
Okay,
maybe I can just add in there quickly. So the demand side for the product is obviously under pressure in terms of the renewable space, but we also see, and we've had a number of calls in the last couple of weeks and months from guys on the supply side, the feedstock side, who are also coming under pressure in terms of how they treat their residuals and their waste products. And so we're seeing inquiries from guys who prepare to help us with feedstock supplies, because they're also under pressure and under the same renewables agenda.
How much would you have to pay for those feedstock supplies?
Well, variable, but people are looking for solutions where they can get rid of some of their residuals and wastes, and we would like to be a solution for it.
I think that's the point, Donald. It actually is an opportunity of itself that we didn't quite expect, but the idea of us being presented and working with them finding a solution is something that's very attractive to them.
I think that's the nature of innovative projects, though, isn't it, Michael? You go out there and suddenly the marketplace comes to you.
Yes, and fingers crossed that'll exactly be what will happen.
Okay, Mike Addison Smith asks, can you advise the overall timing for the intended NASDAQ listing? Which sounds like a very sensible question to me.
It's a very sensible question. I think the timelines from where we are today is that it'll get closed out before the end of May, early June.
He said NASDAQ, he meant OTC, didn't he?
In NASDAQ OTC, correct.
Okay, NASDAQ OTC, fantastic. Okay, Kenneth Kemsley, perhaps our final question of the evening. When production is up and running, what are the likely sales numbers to be achieved? Can you give us it in terms of quarters, he says? Andrew, what do you?
Yeah, maybe I can answer that. So Donald, I think that the thing about the product that we're about to bring to the market is that we're about to find out just how much demand there is for this product. So obviously we have internal modeling, and we've come up with some numbers, and we've shared that with our brokers who've put it out in papers, but we're about to get to that place where we start the production, and we'll really get a good feel of what the demand is once we start doing that, and once the potential customers can come in. Look at the
question I should be asking you, Andrew, what does this business look like in 6 months' time, in a year's time?
Yeah, so I think in terms of our modeling, we looked at this as 2021 is a year where we will look to try and break even. That's the objective for us this year. And then going forward, we see ourselves making profit and EBITDA profit going into 2022 and then beyond. And as we scale that up, obviously the profits scale up with that.
Completely brilliant. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm sure the audience were very appreciative of that. And thank you so much for, we packed a lot in there. We got through an awful lot of questions there.
Thank you, Donald.
Thank you. Okay. And next up is a man who needs very little introduction, really, Cathal Friel from Open Orphan. Open Orphan, a rapidly growing specialist pharmaceutical services CRO. They're the world leader in the testing of vaccines and antivirals using human challenge clinical trials. ORF are listed on AIM, and the market cap is what I believe to be an all-time high of £234 million right now. Can you believe that? From a year ago, that is an incredible journey. Over to you in Dublin, Cathal.
Donald, thank you very much, and thank you for everybody taking the time to listen to all 4 presentations tonight. And without further ado, let me try and get started. The usual disclaimer. Where we are, I think most people are already well aware of Open Orphan. We've had an interesting journey. The piece I keep repeating on this slide is that we're profitable, consistently profitable, throwing off cash every month. The noticeable thing in people who haven't this last month, Investco are now gone. We do have a large range of investors, but they're below the 3% institutions. So people say, oh, where's the big institutions? Unfortunately, when your share price goes up very substantially, institutions generally tend to take profit and move on, but we do still have a lot below that 3%. So I don't want people to feel we don't have institutions. We do have a very loyal retail following, and that's where I'm giving a personal commitment. We will never be raising money again. This business is a services business, the business of making money and handing cash back to shareholders. So I'm going to talk more about that in a minute. The largest shareholder is myself individually, 6.69%, that's disclosable. And I have stated I would like to try and increase my stake in the weeks and months ahead because I have a lockup. The hard lockup finishes the end of June and an orderly market for the next 12 months. But I can absolutely assure people I'm not leaving this company anytime soon, and increasing it is what I want to do. We've got lots of cash and that cash balance is increasing. And the most important thing is we've got 3 non-core assets. I'm going to talk a bit more tonight on them, but the really interesting part, and Donald, I'm going to put my neck in the line. People, it does take a little longer to sometimes run the business, do everything and sell off the non-core, but I'm putting my neck in the line tonight. Within the month of April, all going well, we'd hope to have 1 announcement, if not 2 announcements about 2 of the 3 non-core. So let's watch that space in the month. If all goes well, at least 1 announcement in April and hopefully maybe 2, but we'll see. Look, the 3 of them are there on the last page of investor presentation. The 3 is Immutex, the Prep Pharma stake, and the repurposed immune modulator. The immune modulator will be bundling some other non-core assets in with that, and that's 3 non-core. The beauty about the immune modulator, we own 100% of some of these ones. Unlike Immutex, we have 49% and Prep 62. It's always easier to deal with things when you own 100% of them. But what I would guide people to see our direction of travel is have a look at EKF and their spin-off Renal Analytics. That is kind of our ambition. I know our colleagues in the earlier presentation talked about a NASDAQ offering. Renal Analytics went to NASDAQ pretty quickly. So one of our spin-outs that we're going to announce in the coming month would have ambitions to get to NASDAQ within 12 months. And Renal got to $1 billion pretty quickly. I've said in the last month or 2, I genuinely feel we have a company in our hands that has the ambitions to get to $1 billion. I'm being careful not saying $1 billion sterling, but $1 billion is about 750 million. So between the spin-off and ourselves, that's the target I've set. Also, what has changed in the last month, if people have looked at the subtlety, I've changed my job title. So I have a habit of getting rid of CEOs, and I spoke to you, Donald, earlier. We're now building a kind of substantial company that's going to keep growing and get towards that $1 billion market cap. I've now become CEO. I know it's a dangerous role in the company I am, and I usually fire them. But no, I'm getting comfortable. I think we've got the most amazing team who are stepping up, virtually all hired internally. We haven't been going outside. And it's kind of a little bit of guidance. Why am I doing the CEO? Why am I leaving executive chairman? Well, one of the spin-outs, if we're going to IPO it on AIM and then fairly quickly in NASDAQ, I think I need to keep a hands-on role there as well. So I think some guidance, I'll be sort of stepping in as a non-exec chairman on the spin-out, because I think small cap companies like this, you can't really trust it too much to too many third parties. So the spin-off, the one we have in mind, is going to be managed pretty carefully. I'll be CEO of this one. I'll be non-exec chairman of the spin-off. So that's just reassuring people. Anybody who's watching my LinkedIn and seeing my emails, I have adopted that new role. It's no difference. Executive chairman and CEO, it's the same thing. It just gives me a little bit more flexibility to ensure I stay quite involved that spin-off and well and drive it on. So I say in the coming month, definite update in April on at least 1, if not 2. So Donald, you can hold me accountable to that. Next thing, look, I'm not going to bore people. Everybody knows we've now created a really fast growing, highly profitable. The days of worrying about losses are long gone. That's where we will never be raising money again. And it is handing cash back to our shareholders. So the first of these spin-offs, there's 3 of them. if we do play our cards right in the next 3 or 4 months, all 3 will be spun off and it'll be handed back through dividend species to our shareholders before then summer. And then comes the interesting proposition, when do we make a cash dividend, maybe later this year. What have we? We've got 3 offices. London office, by far the world leader in the testing of vaccines and antivirals. Paris office, data management biostats. Dutch office, CMC and PK. They're really preclinical work, and they help run clinical trials. But the real jewel in the crown is the London office. The London office is the one where Neil Woodford and company would have put 114 million sterling into some years ago. So the bequest is with a lot of assets, and we've seen them. The quarantine unit, we've opened the second one. I'll come to that in a minute, and maybe there's been some speculation about something called St. Pancras, and we're not going to stand still. And I did say I would try. I think there's phenomenal opportunities for us all now. I'm moving my family. I'm based virtually full-time in London. I think post-Brexit, you may agree or disagree with it, has happened. But for people in the life science industry, it brings a lot of opportunities. I think Britain leads the world by 1 million miles on the rollout of the vaccines. That would never have happened only for Brexit. I'll come back more to that in a minute. As a result, there's going to be a lot of spin-off opportunities for us in that space. I do know in the past, people wondered, some of our customers, if you look at them, virtually every large vaccine antiviral company are along the bottom. We're a little concerned as our Dutch and Paris office, we had a lot of RNSs, and they thought there might have been for only 2 or 3 or 400,000. Bear in mind, any of our RNSs, they have to be passed by NOMAD. They're generally 500,000 to 1 million, 1.5 million, even for the Vaughan office. Our London office are much bigger. The last one we did 10 days ago was 7.5 million sterling. And we said we're starting it right away. And all of the revenue we recognized this year. That was an RSV challenge study. And let me come to more of that in a few minutes. So I want to reassure people, anytime we issue an RNS, they're generally significant revenue contracts. There's usually a contract signed most weeks with Vaughan and most months with our London office. And a lot of those we wouldn't announce them, we just run them out. It's quite funny. A few years ago or a year ago, 500,000 was a big amount of money, but sub 500,000, sub 750,000, we no longer announce those type of deals. Progression, really, look, just listing them all up, some of the more significant contract wins. I've talked about the RSV one, and all that say, watch this space in the coming months. The really important bit would have been getting the first COVID challenge study approved. It took a little bit longer maybe than expected, but we're approved. We did announce then the first 3 volunteers have successfully gone home. That hasn't happened anywhere in the world. And again, the British government are a partner there, the Vaccine Task Force, where we deliberately infected. And this week and every week going forward for the coming weeks and months, we will be testing COVID on healthy volunteers, making them sick for the standard 2 weeks, making them well and sending them home safe. And we would have learned a lot. The big part of that is you can never really test vaccines thoroughly in the community quickly and effectively as you can do in the challenge study. The interesting part about the pandemic, I know it's been awful for most of us, it is creating a lot of opportunities, because at the moment it's pretty clear. Chris Whitty announced last Thursday that the pandemic in his head, as our Chief Medical Director in the United Kingdom, that the pandemic is now more or less over. We've hit this 30 or 40% vaccination percentage of the population. In actual fact, it's getting close to 50%. All the vulnerable are done. So I think the United Kingdom is going to start looking at COVID as influenza and treating it accordingly. So we can get more optimistic going into the summer. Life as normal is returning. However, we do have these variants, better known as mutations. And that's going to mean for a number of years, who knows how long, there's going to be an annual update to the COVID vaccines. And guess what? That means we're going to be very busy. There's going to be annual, people will be told to take their annual influenza jab. And likewise, take your annual COVID vaccine. So that is an update there. There will be more COVID studies coming through. We've capability of doing a lot of them. And it's an exciting space to be in at the moment. The big part of that is that we've had decades of underinvestment in communicable diseases, i.e. infectious diseases. There's been so much money spent on gene therapy, so many tens of billions spent on oncology, cancer treatments, virtually nothing on vaccines, antivirals, monoclonals. So the beauty about now, the world is catching up. No government, no country in the world is ever going to want to be faced with a pandemic like we've just come through. And I keep saying come through. We're involved in testing lots, so we can see the vaccines are working. Anybody, anywhere in the world, and as of over the weekend, close to 400 million people in the world got a vaccine. Doesn't matter if it's Oxford, Pfizer, Sputnik, or the Chinese one. Of that 400 million, not a single person has gone to hospital sick. Not a single person died. Not a single person got any severe version of COVID. So that's the huge one. So that tells you the vaccines are working, but they have to be completely adopted, changed, modified every year. And that means there's going to be a lot of challenge study business. But beyond COVID, there's a ton of work. We're now working on norovirus. That's the vomiting disease in hospitals. We're working on more RSV, an awful lot of influenza work. There's a huge view now. The worry is the next pandemic could be influenza or bird flu. We're working on all of those. So no, it's an interesting space to be in, open orphan HVO, where we're seeing a lot of action and a lot done, but a lot more to do. And this is really exciting. The next generation, it's intranasal. That's hopefully going to be leaving our clinic within a week or two, successfully passing phase 1. It had to be done in quarantine because it was a nasal spray. And I think you will see and hear an awful lot internationally about this particular vaccine. And it'll be, it's believed it could be up there alongside the Oxford AstraZeneca one for interest in the developing world. It's going to be very low cost, doesn't need needles, doesn't need cold chain, and one little aerosol could do a whole community. So yeah, and that we were very brave. We took that on early last year when nobody was interested. That was a risk, and it's paid off handsomely. So that's really going to put open orphan HVO on the world map later this summer, if that's going to be adopted as the vaccine for the developing world. Bear in mind, we don't own it. It's owned by Codigenics, and the Serum Institute of India have an involvement. But we're the people who tested it, put the trial, and that is a pretty good place to be. As I say, there's going to be more and more vaccines coming through, not just for COVID, but in the COVID, you need new vaccines to deal with new variants. Really importantly, our flu camp, every trial needs lots of volunteers. So again, I've said we're availing. The pandemic has produced a lot of opportunities. We've the Whitechapel Hotel was closed across the road. We converted it. In actual fact, a client paid for the conversion and paid for the first year's rent. So we basically got a free 19-person quarantine clinic we're now filling up. A Manchester screening centre that was lying idle, we've taken over that. Again, we're not building up a big cost base. We're being very careful with money. We're treating the money as our own. It's yours, it's investors, it's mine. So we're very careful. Also, we took over one of the largest Costa coffee shops in London in Whitechapel. It's right beside our building. And we converted it. And that first picture on the left, that's who would have thought that would have looked like Costa coffee, the one there. It certainly doesn't look like Costa these days. But again, it threw up an opportunity, closed. Unfortunately, the staff got let go. But we've rehired them. And the beauty about some of these, we're trying to, the poor individuals who worked in some of these facilities, the coffee shops, hotels, now we're actually bringing back the older staff, training them up, and try and give them roles and jobs going forward. Again, that's just a look inside the hotel, the Whitechapel Clinic. It's a 26-bed boutique, and then we've got a 19-bed quarantine clinic. It's literally across the road. Talk about getting lucky. We also have the access to the 11th floor of the Royal Free Hospital. And I think some of the more eagle-eyed of you might have seen something about St. Pancras, another London-based organisation we're now making use of to try and process our burgeoning amount of volunteers we have coming through. Disease in motion, again, I know people are getting impatient, where's our wearables, but that is almost and close now to a standalone business, what we've done there. So rather than rush out, do a quickie deal, we've got 3 non-core assets that will be spin off. Preference is the public company standalone. Well, hey, here's potentially a 4th public company coming down the track. We don't know yet, but watch this space about the whole wearables, disease in motion. We have the world's largest database of infectious disease progression data. And my belief is it would be really nice for all shareholders, including myself, to be sitting by Christmas holding a share in how would we call it, an infectious disease data business that could be spun off from the parent company. So there could be a fourth non-core asset, and we'll say we will update the market appropriately and accordingly when there's something to say about that potential fourth non-core asset is now basically a standalone business in its own right. And to the immediate thing, there's lots of conversations and people wondering what's going on. So just to repeat again on the non-core assets, what we have, Immutex is 49% owned, and again is a universal flu vaccine, as universal mosquito vaccine, and it could be repurposed to COVID. Our partners there is a Seek Group, and they've rebranded themselves to Consvers V. They are making good progress. We're 49, they're 51. Sometimes partners don't move as fast as we like to move. And as you know, we only can move as fast as our partner moves. So I think we're increasingly confident that's going in the right direction of travel. I emphasize with a 49% shareholder. If we were 51, it might have moved much faster, but I think if you watch dispatches, it's progress. Prep Pharma, we are the 62.6% shareholder there, so that's moving along. I've always said that was the much smaller of them, but again, I'm increasingly confident that there's a role to move that on, and again, into a public vehicle. And the big one, the repurposed immune modulator, we're putting in there on that. It's a repurposed immune modulator. Was for arthritis that now certainly looks like it's good for severe influenza and COVID applications. But within that non-core grouping, we're going to put a number of other non-core assets that are in that the company developed years ago when Uncle Neil Woodford put 114 million in. I say we are now purely, Open Orphan is purely a profitable services company, clinical trial company to be precise, and we're the world leader in testing vaccines and antivirals using human challenge studies. So all of these, anything that's product has to be spun off in the product company, because you can't really have product companies sitting beside services. And our plan going forward is keep growing the clinical trial company. We're in a great space, keep building it out, doing joint ventures. We now have, in theory, 3-floor clinics. So the idea would be, rather than rushing abroad, I think the United Kingdom is a fabulous place to do all our expansion and do everything there. We've got now probably the best regulator in the world to approve things, MHRA, and the United Kingdom has an absolute head start. I'm currently back in my home here in Dublin. The kids are home for Easter, but I return to London full time again on Monday. But even in Dublin, people don't realize how far it's behind the United Kingdom. They're barely touching 10% of the population vaccinated, where we know everybody in London, as of Friday, there was over 30 million. And the last time I checked this, 67 million of us in the United Kingdom. So that's over, nudging close over 50%. So that's a great history, a great start. So it's a nice place to be, and how we work going forward. So in conclusion, we're very clearly, we stopped saying operationally profitable in Q4. We're now very clearly profitable every month this year and every year going forward. We're in a good space. The big one for anybody thinking and buying, the reason I've never been more excited the opportunity we have, is for the next 10 years, it will be the decade of vaccines and infectious diseases, antivirals, and monoclonals. The world does not want to be ever shut down again. I think Chris Whitty said, look, it's been horrible. It's been difficult. So the way to fix that is make sure there's never a pandemic again, is have loads of antivirals, loads of monoclonals, loads of vaccines. And beyond that, we're starting hopefully our first antimicrobial study. That's for antibiotics. So that's where all our challenge studies can be, not just for vaccines, can be done for antibiotics. So the range is extensive. We keep adding to our pipeline of challenge studies, which is very important. We have the disease in motion platform, is now patented. And I'm making it very clear that in my books, in theory, could be a standalone. So we've got the 3 non-core assets, and I've got my neck in the line tonight saying by the end of the month of April, at least one of those, there will be an announcement as to direction of travel. It will be via dividend species back to all us. I'm a shareholder, as of all of you are tonight. And it looks like now we might have a 4th non-core asset to keep us busy between now and Christmas. My preference is always to hand the shares back in another public company, and then you, the shareholders, can hold the shares and decide what you'd like to do with them. So I think, Donald, I've hit my 20 minutes. So maybe back over to you for some questions from the floor.
Great. Okay, let me, well, I think we're all slightly gobsmacked by all that, Cale.
Thanks for that.
where
I'd say a lot done, more to do, a lot more to do.
My goodness, where do I start? There's a cornucopia of opportunities there. So I never thought I'd hear you say this. You're now the chief executive and not the executive chairman.
Right.
Talk me through the whys and wherefores of that. And are you going to have an executive chairman, or perhaps more properly a non-exec chairman to backfill you?
Yeah, no, I think, again, looking internally, this habit, I think what happens lots is small. In Burma, we're still only small in the US standards. We're, okay, it's getting bigger, 230 or 240 million market cap, but we're still modest and small. We don't need to go out. We've got a number of board members who would make a very good non-exec chair. So I think we're at the moment. The reason, the logic is that, look, we're growing the company. It's a grown-up company.
Yeah.
But at the same time, what I don't want to do is some of these spin-offs, particularly there's one, have a particular, I think we can, and I keep dropping hints, look at what EKF did with renal analytics. It became $1 billion in over 18 months. One of our non-core assets, not say which one of them is, it'll be done by an IPO and AIM. We believe it will get it to NASDAQ. So I think that one, I very much want to keep hands on board. And I think the ideal role for me there would be non-exec chairman, where I can crack the whip and make sure no messing and get that company growing fast.
Did you say you're going to IPO it on AIM and then transfer it to NASDAQ, or?
Dual listed NASDAQ.
Dual listed.
Dual listed. And that the timing for that will be probably Easter next year. Now, I don't want any confusion. Open Orphan has no plans currently on leaving AIM or going to NASDAQ. Look, we don't necessarily need it. We've got all the money we want. We're generating cash. We've got a loyal following. So I think we can steady the course in, I would call, the primary company, which is the clinical trials company as Open Orphan. But I might drop a hint if people want to have a look at that. There's a website up there. I think most people know.
Well, it's not going to be buy from, because you said that's smaller. So you've been dropping lots of hints and clues as you've gone. So that's smaller. So it's not necessarily going to be that one, which leaves us with Immutex, which you've got 49% of. But it's harder to because you don't quite control that one. That's harder to. So is it the immune modulator then?
What I would say is maybe suggest people have a little look at a website called ORPH pharma.com. That might get, no, we're not saying anything. We'll have to announce something pretty soon, but that's the direction. And where does ORF come from? That's a ticker symbol for Open Orphan, and so ORF Pharma. So I think some of our pharma products will go there, and that might allow us then to do later in the year ORF Data. That could be another spin-off. So we're trying to create things we can grow and build and grow and build and put a solid foundation as we go forward.
Okay. Can I ask you about your hard lock-in? Ian Mackey is saying, can he clarify, is your hard lock-in to June 2022 or is it to June 2021?
The hard lock-in was 24 months from June 2019, which expires end of this June. However, I think in a fast-growing company like this, the soft lock-in is a second year for this June going forward. However, I think most people know, as a board member, the chances of a board member in a small company that's growing fast ever being free of insider information is close to zero. So it's more or less a hard lock-in for another 12 months. But I've said I really want to expand my position and increase my stake. So the lock-in doesn't really matter. I'm here for the long haul. There's no absolute reason why I want to sell shares.
Okay.
And so on the spin out, I'm also, look, I have a little vehicle called Raglan Capital. That's where I hold the stakes, including my Amrit stake, myself and my co-founder, Ian O'Connell. We said Amrit. Amrit now is actually punching close to $1 billion enterprise value. It's on NASDAQ. It's on AIM. It's got about a 500 million market cap, but it's also got 250 million sterling bonds. So that gets it. But we still have a stake there. But what I'm emphasizing is that in the spin-off, if there's an IPO spin-off, I'm making a commitment. I'm putting $500,000 of my personal cash into the spin-off, and it'll do a solid lock-up again for 3 years.
What about Cotogenics? You sound as though you've fallen in love with Cotogenics. Would you be thinking of taking a share stake in Cotogenics, or how might that work? The intranasal spray people.
I think, unfortunately, somebody says no remedy, and it's a bit like us in Open Orphan. They don't need cash. They have some of the biggest, one of the largest investors in the world, a guy called Jim Simons. He's the guy who wrote the book on who figured the market. He's the most profitable. It's called Remoteness Technologies, the world's most profitable hedge fund. You probably haven't heard about it. It makes $6 billion a year. Single shareholder, Jim Simons. He's a personal investor in Codogenics, as is two big pharmas, and the Serum Institute in India involved. So I'd love to have us taken it. Unfortunately, not available, but it's great. We're doing all their phase 1 work, and Codogenics, in our view, has the ability to be even bigger than the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, particularly in the developing world, because it's cheap, it's very effective, it's nasal, it means needle-free. So yeah, and that's really exciting to be in that space. That's us making a mark up the big boys now, allow for clinical trials.
Okay, disease emotion. Could you give us more of a time frame on disease emotion? Your potential fourth spin-off.
Yeah, look, where we are, you rightly said, Immutex, unfortunately, with a 49% shareholder, and despite, I don't do too much shouting and pushing, but despite how hard we push on Immutex, if the 51% shareholder doesn't want to move at our speed, and sometimes have to be calmed down, don't run too fast, but I always think go quick and don't be afraid to break things, just as long as you fix them as you go along. But yeah, why I say Immutex, it's making progress. We're very excited. It's going the right direction. Maybe it could go a little faster. I'm sure that listening to me here now, I'm talking to them. Move along, guys, hurry up, is my view to Immutex. We're all hungry for a deal. But
subtle as ever, Cale.
Yeah. But I would say, yes, look, I mean, very clear, there is the bones of another spin out in disease and motion. So we could run off and do a couple of very quickie wearable deals, but why not build a very big cake? And again, ORPH data would make it, PLC would make a lovely spin off. We could put all of that into, I think the public markets would love to see a data company being spun out of a clinical trials company on the back of us having genomic data from a regional open orphan genomic, and then the world's largest database of infectious disease progression. So I just think these things, we will control 100% of ORPH data. We control 100% of ORPH pharma. And there's a kind of, there's a company in North America called Rowan. They spun off companies now, 8 billion worth of them. They're all Vans. So I think ORPH's, ORPH, that's our ticker, so people can know the home of it. It came out of the regional company. So ORPH data, ORPH pharma, there's a whole series of things we could do.
Okay, I realize we're out of time, but I'm going to be very naughty and continue just for two more questions. David Hosking and somebody else have both asked the same thing. Is the $1 billion target for ORPH, does that include the spin-offs or does it exclude the spin-offs?
I think a good question. No, I think would be I think it includes the spin-off, the whole thing, because
sadly it includes the spin-offs.
We're only 240. We're only 240 million market cap on our own at the moment. So, and I say dollars, not sterling. So if you put it with the spin-offs, it's a good target. Look, it means I don't want people going mad. I keep saying people, share price going through the roof, steady progression, a foundation under things, but it's a really nice target. Could we get what's today open orphan with its non-core assets to $1 billion within a year or two?
Okay, my final question for you, Cahill. Where do you see open orphan in 1 year's time?
That's a good question. Bigger, better, stronger, and doing lots of more of the same and exciting things, hopefully. And
will you have got to that $1 billion target in 1 year's time, do you think?
It's a good target to go for, isn't it?
You're always a man for targets, Cahill. Thank you so much for joining us. Next up, it's Emmerson, who've been developing the Kemset potash mine in Northern Morocco for a number of years now, and recently raised £5.5 million to be spent on initial groundwork for the mine site, including the initial construction of the mine decline and detailed plans. The Kemset potash mine is often described as a low-cost, high-margin project, and Emmerson CEO Graham Clarke is hoping construction work begins by the end of the year. Tonight, we're joined by Graham Clarke, CEO, and Charles Vaughan, his head of corporate development, and together they're going to explain why Kemset is a fantastic project.
Okay, thank you, Donald. Good evening to everybody that's listening in, and hope you enjoy our short presentation, and then we'll take questions after that. So we'll just flick to the first slide. Okay, so this slide will just show here the highlights of the project. Tonight we're just going to focus on the highlights and then a few of the aspects that add value to the project, but also underpin the sort of fundamentals behind the project. So from our feasibility study, which was completed last year in June, the project in production of 1.1 billion MPV8, and that's actually taking a more conservative price assumption than we did in the feasibility study. So that's with a potash price of $360 a ton. And we'll talk a bit more about the potash price, which I know is something that interests a lot of people, along with the market. So we'll cover that off in a bit more detail. But where we'll be, because of the nature of the development, combination of the location, the geography, but also the geology, we will be in the lowest quartile in terms of MOP producers globally, which to a large extent actually makes price assumptions and forecasts irrelevant to us to a large extent, because we will make money, wherever the price sits once we're into production. One of the key things about the location of the project: first-rate jurisdiction in Morocco, very supportive of foreign direct investment, and particularly in the mining sector. And the geography, as I've said, the location very close to the port of Casablanca and other ports on the Moroccan coast, which gives us easy access to any of the markets around the world. And again, we use an example and compare our costs of shipping to Brazil compared to the large Canadian producers. But the reality is that our product will probably stay a lot closer to home, because Morocco itself is currently importing 700,000 to 800,000 tons of MOP per year. And we will actually be producing around that amount in country once we get started. Initial 19-year mine life, and that's from less than half of the resource that we've identified, so significant potential to increase the life of mine. And we'll be the first MOP producer in Africa, which is really key when we look at where our product is likely to go in terms of the market. As I've said, Morocco is importing a significant amount of MOP, but Africa as a whole, where a lot of the world's available arable land, agricultural land exists, the application rates of fertilizers on that continent are very low compared to global standards, and will have to increase for us to be able to meet the challenges of food security around the world. So this slide, we've talked about SOP production as an add-on to the project for some time, and we did some initial scoping study level work. We've actually kicked off a detailed feasibility study into the SOP project. But it really does stand out as another, huge opportunity, and it's because, again, of the location, close to the port of Djorf-les-Far. And if you're converting MOP to SOP, the higher value potash product, you need sulfuric acid, and at this location, there's a ready supply of sulfuric acid, and also the opportunity to, the byproducts that go with the process, the Mannheim process, in converting to SOP. There's also the byproducts, there's a market for those locally as well, which makes it a fairly unique location to actually build an SOP project of the type that we're looking at. Standalone, it's $100 million plus MPV, but it gives us flexibility and access to another part of the market. And we've been undertaking some work looking at a phased approach to the development of the project, but very importantly, as part of that work, the expansion opportunities. And adding an SOP plant is obviously one of those. And we'll be updating the market on that specifically in the not too distant future. But it just demonstrates that standalone project with MOP as per the feasibility study, we do have a significant opportunity adding SOP as a second product. And also on the next slide, we talk about the opportunity with the de-icing salt. We've made assumptions in the feasibility study that we would, as part of the process, produce 1 million tons of road de-icing salt, which we could ship to the northeastern seaboard of the United States. Annual market there, 8 to 10 million tons for de-icing salt. We have an opportunity to increase our level of production up to around 4 million tons of de-icing quality salt, and also the potential to increase a higher value salt product if we so wish. It's a good market, fairly stable pricing that fluctuates depending on how mild the winter is or how severe it is, but around $40 a ton. And we can get our de-icing salt from the site to the northeastern seaboard of the United States for around $20 a ton. So that gives us a significant opportunity. Every ton we sell, that margin goes straight to the bottom line and puts us even more firmly down at the bottom of the potash cost curve, which is really, really important to us. So just talking a bit about what we plan to do this year. The year started well with the gaining of the mining license. That gives us sign-off from the Moroccan authorities to develop the resource that we've identified. And to get that mining license, you have to have done the exploration work, having previously held exploration licenses. Done the exploration, you've got a resource identified, compliant to one of the standards, at JORC in our case. But you've also done a feasibility study to demonstrate that you can economically extract the resource, which we've done. So effectively, it's sort of government sign-off that we've done all of the work to demonstrate that there is an economic project. So that was a great start. The next key thing is the environmental permissions. We've done all of our environmental social impact assessment work to World Bank standards over and above what Morocco would require in the country. So we've done that, to the top standards, and we're well through the process now. Submitted all of the documentation in November last year. We've been through the public inquiry period, and now there's a series of meetings with the authorities, and we expect to have that permission in the next month or so. Next two things really key to taking the project forward into construction, which is to bring in a strategic investment partner. So that's either coming in just as an equity partner to help us with the equity part of the funding that we need to raise, but also potentially, and we've got a number of conversations, very positive conversations going on with potential partners who would come in actually with an interest, more of an interest in the project and the product, importantly. And we'll talk a bit more about the importance of being an independent producer later on. And alongside that, we're working on putting together the debt side of the funding and pulling together a banking syndicate who will support us with the project finance that we require. And the intention there is that in Q3 we'll have those things in place. And the idea is then we can start construction before the end of the year, which is our target. Alongside the funding, obviously we will need to sign offtake for the MOP. That will be important for the banks. We've been holding off on signing off the product. We know that we can. Any fertilizer trader would be very happy to take all of our product. Fertilizer traders can't get their hands on potash because the big producers control the market and the sales. So we know we can sign off takes. What we're doing is holding that as a trump card in ongoing discussions with potential strategic partners who are fertilizer producers who would actually like to get their hands on that product. So that is really important to keep that for the time being as those conversations progress. And also we look to get some sales contracts for the icing salt in place, and there are discussions ongoing with regard to that. And as I've said, look at the opportunities to actually increase the sales above the 1 million ton assumption that we've made previously. Complete the SOP feasibility study, as I've said, and the target is all of those things in place, start early construction works before the end of the year. And that's, it's quite an aggressive target. It's a big year if we tick off all of those milestones. But one thing that the project has successfully done over the last couple of years is actually hit the targets that it sets and deliver against the milestones that we identify. So we're very confident that we'll be able to get to the position where we can actually start construction during this year. I'll hand over now to Charles, who's just going to talk a bit about the potash market and pricing, and I'll finish off the presentation with the last couple of slides in a few moments.
Thanks, Graham. So we've got a lot to do, and the financing of this project is obviously a formidable hurdle. But I think it's important to sort of understand that the backdrop here is now really in our favour. It's gone from quite a horrid headwind in the last couple of years to what looks like is a sustained tailwind behind us, which is which is the excitement around the need for more potash, which is always something, it's a commodity which people find quite difficult to assess and gauge what the real demand and supply is for it. You don't get an LME price on it. You only get snapshots here and there and what you read of other producers in what they choose to disclose. But what you can see is on live prices is the main demanders of it, which are the crops, and the main uses wheat and corn and soybeans. And as you can see, in the last 1 year, in the last 5 years, these prices have really been marching higher. And of course, what that means is the farmers in all the areas of the world that we're going to be addressing they scrabbled to increase their yields, and they got more money to buy the inputs, the fertilizers, to increase their yields. So what you'll tend to have is these prices as a lead, and then the lagging 6 months behind or a year behind, at least a season behind, is the potash demand coming through. So if you're worried about the potash price and there being too much supply and it always being a moribund sort of commodity, look at the farmer prices they're getting, and then just understand that they are just calling on more and more potash, and that effect brings it up. So that tailwind is super important. There's roughly 75 million tons a year of MOP, which is our main one, consumed a year. On average, people are calling for 2.5% demand growth a year, and there is no reason to expect that demand to falter. It's obviously a function of population growth and also the changing sort of dietary fads as people get richer. So we're very confident that you're going to see this demand carry on, and the reason we put it like that is the supply is something to keep an eye on, but the demand, and in context of that demand of 1.5 to 2 million tons a year of new potash, the project, though it's sizable, that we're bringing on is really as nothing in the world picture of what is required, as you'll see. So we wanted to address this thing of there being too much capacity in the market, and the one that people always are sort of aware of as this big elephant of will it, won't it, is BHP's Jansen project, which is in Canada. And so if you look in the context of what's happening here, BHP has been deliberating for a long time over whether to build Jansen. It's in that big potash belt in Saskatchewan, and it's supposedly going to make an investment decision mid-year. So we'll see that. But this is something that not only won't kill the potash market, it is totally necessary for the future of supply meeting what the demand is already going to be. So what I mean by that is BHP has done a huge study on potash along with other people. We quote in our in a lot of our numbers of the long-term price of 412 a ton, which is 412 landed in Brazil. That's from the industry leading experts, Argus. So that's not our number, it's theirs. Look at BHP, who's actually in the business of building this mine or deciding whether to build this mine. Yeah, it's a big mine. It's 4.5 million tons if it produces at full capacity in a 75 million ton market. But if they do make the decision, they'll start it in 2026 and they'll ramp it up such that it's at capacity or approaching capacity by 2030. And they'll do that on the basis that at Vancouver, the price they get is $327. That Vancouver price is the lowest price in the world because that's where all of the Saskatchewan potash has to start, and then it has to find markets. So in rough numbers, Brazil tends to be $80 higher than that. So BHP's numbers actually correspond to Argus's. And if you just do a rough calc on it bringing on its 4.5 million tons by 2030, you know, really the world will, just going back to that slide before, it will have needed 15 million tons a year of new supply anyway in that time. So we are very comfortable that though the potash market is well supplied, the demand, because it just keeps on growing, and we do not think that's likely to change unless population stops growing, it's going to require not only our project and BHP's, it's going to require lots of projects. And I think that you come back to Graham's point about where we sit in the cost curve, and this is a project that is going to work. And you know, it's largely because of the geography, and we keep making this point about the logistics, but this is where we come in under all these guys with excellent mines and excellent mine gate costs, but actually landing it in the markets they want to go to. All of the other expenses come in and make us actually far more efficient, actually landing it in Brazil. And as Graham mentioned, there's a good chance that we don't even have to ship it to Brazil in the end, but we'll see.
Okay, 1 more minute, chaps. 1 more minute.
Okay, well, we'll be very quick, Donald. So this slide just simply looks at, you know, the market it's very well established, it's very well controlled. All of the production of MOP is in the hands of a few large players. It has been for years. They basically control the supply to match the demand, you know, which is gradually increased, as Charles has said. As an independent producer, we will stand out. There'll be a lot of the fertilizer producers who struggle to get hold of potash, other than from their competitors, the big potash producers. Will be very keen to take our product. So we have no concerns over selling the product, and we will actually be, you know, strategically important as an independent. And then we'll just flip to the last slide, and I'll rattle through that so we're done in time. Okay, so just in summary, it's an outstanding project in terms of the economics. The location and the geology, you know, underpins that. It's low risk, low capex development, and the logistical benefit of its location is what puts us right down at the bottom of the cost curve. We have the opportunities. It's not just going to be MOP and SOP and salt. So the 3 products we'll be selling, and our target, aggressive target, start construction before the end of 2021. So we'll leave it at that and be very happy to take any questions you may have.
Okay, fantastic, chaps. That was terrific. What a great project you've got there, Graham. Okay, Mark Savvy asks, how are you planning to power and fuel the site, the ChemSet site, given its remoteness?
So, you know, this is one of the things about Morocco. It has great infrastructure, and it stands out certainly by African standards. We're less than 15 kilometers from the main power distribution network. So we have a short link in, and we've got an MOU signed with a renewable energy company who would supply all the power that we require for the project. So, you know, the infrastructure in Morocco is great. There's a highway passes right next to the site, so it's simply a junction, and we're onto the highway to take the product down to the port. And as I've said, the power distribution network is really close by. So a very low cost for us to actually link into the main infrastructure to serve the project.
How long have you guys actually been planning this project? Because I presume those are the sort of things which will have, yeah, you'll have inherited the solutions to those things, I suspect.
Well, yeah, I mean, the team have been working. I joined in July last year. The feasibility study was already done, so all of this work had been covered off. But it's been 2 or 3 years' work for the team. We've got a really good team based in Morocco, Moroccan nationals who, you know, who interact with all of the authorities. We've built up great relationships in country. So, you know, the project has moved a long way already. And this year is a big year to finish the permitting and get the funds in place so that we can actually start construction. Okay,
you mentioned permitting, yeah, and in your presentation you talked about environmental permits as being one of your big milestones. Can we expect them next month? Can we expect them the month after that? Or is it just not the sort of thing that you're privy to?
Well, we've always said we'd get both the main permits in the first half of the year, so we've already got one, you know, earlier than that, and we are confident we'll get the second. It's one of those you can't put an absolute time on it. You know, we've made great progress. There were no issues raised in the public inquiry phase. So we're confident it'll be in the next month or two, and certainly in the first half of this year. There's no concerns about that at all.
Is it worth putting into context the Northern Morocco and the site? You are pretty far away from anywhere.
Well, the actual site is it's actually in an agricultural area, but we're 80 kilometers from the coast, from the northern coast of Morocco, 150 kilometers from the major port of Casablanca, where there is excess capacity for shipping, so we have no sort of port infrastructure costs required, and we're going to truck the product down to the port, and from Casablanca we have access to all of the major markets. But as we've said, our neighbours are OCP, the largest phosphate producer in the world, Moroccan parastatal. They've got 20,000 employees, massive company, and they are currently using 300,000 to 400,000 tons of MOP per year, all imported, to make NPK fertilizers. So we go into production, we have a ready market in Morocco for the product. So it doesn't, the likelihood of it ever leaving Morocco is fairly slim in reality.
So OCP are a potential strategic investment partner. I don't think that's a particular secret. So what stage are discussions with them, or are you having similar discussions with as many other people?
Well, there's been discussions on and off with OCP for a couple of years. We have been recently talking to them again, and we're in the process of discussing what the opportunity may look like. They're obviously interested in the product, but we're having similar conversations with other fertilizer companies who are interested in the products that we have. So the way we're approaching this is that the real value in this project is when we raise the funds and get into construction and operations. That's when we deliver the real value. So we are currently open to talk to whoever may be interested in supporting us, and keep us in much flexibility and keep our options open for as long as we can.
It's a game of poker, and you're keeping your cards close to your chest. Is that what you're saying?
Well, yes, absolutely. But with the product, as I said, we see that as a trump card. That is a trump card in getting this project built, because a lot of the big fertilizer producers have to buy their potash from their competitors, and they would love to be able to buy their potash from an independent such as ourselves.
Independent makes a lot of sense. Now,
yeah.
someone here, Amin Chowdhury, I don't know if there is an answer to this one, but when do you expect the first potash to be out of the ground, so to speak, he asks. Let me just chuck that away and see if you laugh at me. No.
Well, if we can get the funding in place this year, as we're striving to do, and start early construction works before the end of the year, it would be towards the end of 2023 that the first potash would come out of the mine. And into the process
there is an answer with a fair wind.
Yep.
The end of 2023.
Yep. So end of 23, and then ramp up production during 24, and be in full production before the end of 2024. That is the timeline that we have.
Okay, let's turn to financing. That's the other big topic. You've just brought in a really interesting new non-exec called James Kelly. What does James Kelly bring to the party?
Well, I'll give an answer, and maybe Charles can step in as well. So James, he's got sort of real live knowledge of funding, mining projects with his background, and the companies that he's involved with personally. So if he certainly brings the ability to help us get the best deal that we can get, the best value in terms of the funding, the makeup of the funding packages, and potentially a more direct involvement with his experience and knowledge of certain funding opportunities. But maybe Charles, you'd just like to talk about some of the areas that we're looking at in terms of funding at the moment.
Yeah. So the one we've sort of gone for as the sort of plan A is to get a strategic investor who's either likely an industry player or even just a financial investor to come into the top co of Emmerson, and probably not a huge amount all at once, but take a position which is meaningful to the market, 10-20% of Emmerson. and therefore be the anchor investor in the equity portion of the financing once we've got the bank debt in place. And there have been various people who are in the data room sort of making that consideration. I think James, he'll be useful on that, of course, helping the board assess. But another route to us could be looking at a royalty or a stream, because it's actually a very high margin and long life.
And James Kelly has connections with Trident.
Obviously, Trident. I don't. You know, I know.
Is that a red herring?
I don't see Trident as a potential demander of a stream or a royalty in this. I don't think it's. I think Trident's actually too small for this sort of thing. But what Trident's in a pack of a whole lot of newbies in this space, and there's been terrific demand from investors, especially in Canada actually, but also in England, for these royalty and stream companies, which means there's a huge amount of money. So it's not impossible that we find ourselves putting something like that on the table as a way of helping close the equity portion of what's going to be
fantastic. Lloyd Phillips is asking lots of questions, all in a big bundle. Let me continue with the financing theme. He says it's 70-30 debt to equity split. Why wouldn't you actually go for 100% debt, which might be less dilutive?
Well, you wouldn't really get 100% debt, and if you did get 100% debt, it would likely be at a very large interest cost.
So that's not the way to do it.
The people we're talking to are the big lending banks, and 70 is roughly the right sort of proportion before you get into onerous coupons.
It's like the largest mortgage you can get on your house at a decent rate.
Yeah.
Okay. Graham, back to you. How much extra mine life are you hoping for? Asks Lloyd Phillips.
Well, we've got the 19 years is from less than 50%, so there is the potential to double it. We're actually, as part of the sort of phased approach, we've actually been looking at the southwest area of the resource, which isn't in the mine plan, and how we can bring that in, maybe bring that in sooner. But that would be to facilitate an increase in production as a potential. So I believe there's the opportunity to double the life. And there are leases.
So is it 9 currently? Would that make it 18?
No, it's 19 currently. So we'd be approaching 40. But OCP also hold exploration licenses in the area of the same basin. So obviously, if we did anything with OCP, there's the opportunity there to combine the whole of the basin, which would probably take it well over a 50-year life.
Okay, fantastic. Now, gentlemen, on that bombshell, I'm going to end your presentation. Thank you so much. That was terrific, really interesting. Our final company for the night, they're focused on cancer and skin cancer, so oncology and dermatology. Last month, Incanthera raised 1.14 million through an oversubscribed placing with investors to fund the commercialization of Sol, a sun cream designed to prevent skin cancer. In September 2020, two successful skin cancer studies surpassed expectations by demonstrating permutation on human skin. No doubt the guys will explain what this all means. And now commercial discussions are underway with two global cosmetic companies. I am delighted to be joined tonight by Tim McCarthy, Chairman, and Dr. Simon Ward, CEO at Incanthera. Welcome, gentlemen.
Good evening. Good evening, Donald. Thank you very much for that introduction. And we're going to take the listeners through a short presentation and obviously Q&A. So hopefully Simon is going to drive the presentation for us. But just to, we are relatively new, I think, to a lot of your listeners on LSE. So first few slides are very much to introduce the company, and then we're going to concentrate on the product which you just highlighted, which was what we call Sol, which is a product we've developed for the prevention and treatment of skin cancers. It has a very exciting profile. So let's just take you through the first few slides. So the focus of the company is very much to develop novel medicines in the oncology area, i.e. the cancer area, through what we call targeted technologies. So by targeting our our therapies, we are looking to make them more effective, but at the same time to either eliminate or at least minimize the side effects, the typical side effects, which one sees quite commonly with oncology products. Now, looking at the heritage of the company, the background, we are a company that was spun out of the University of Bradford. So Simon, who's going to speak in a moment, was the founder of the company, and he was approached by the university a number of years ago to see whether he could help to develop, in a commercial sense, some of the technologies which they were developing in the University of Bradford. And on the campus of Bradford is a dedicated facility called the Institute of Cancer Therapeutics, which is a 4-story building housing about 50 researchers, both PhD students, right the way through professor level. And they're doing some cutting edge research in the area of oncology. And some of those products were reaching the point where they needed to, what we call in the industry, throw them over the wall, i.e. from research into clinical development. And so they were looking for a solution. And the solution was to spin out this company. And if you look at the name of Institute of Cancer Therapeutics and squash it up, you get the name of Incanthera. So that's where we originated from, both in our heritage and our name. And without embarrassing Simon too much, the clever thing that he did at the time of establishing the company was to put together what we call a pipeline agreement with the universities, so that we get the first right to look at anything which the guys are doing there still, and they're very, very active. And that's very important for a company like ours, because, as I'm sure a lot of your listeners tonight will appreciate, you can't really run a company like this as a one product company. So you need to have a portfolio, which we do have, both from products we've taken from university. We've taken 3 into the pipeline agreement so far, and also we've accessed products from outside. So we've got a great portfolio of products which we're currently developing. In terms of the business model, it's slightly different from what a lot of the listeners will be used to in our sector. So they'll be used to companies taking products at a relatively early stage, looking to raise an enormous amount of money over lots and lots of different fundraisings in order to take those products through clinical development in the normal way, phase 1, 2, and 3. And that's very expensive. It takes a lot of time, and it's very high risk. Now, the rewards, if you get it right, are stupendous, but we've taken a very different approach here. So right from the beginning, we're clearly looking to acquire cutting-edge technologies, both in oncology, which is our primary focus to begin with, and more in the area of dermatology as well. And once we've acquired those intellectual property rights or technology, we bring them in-house, and you'll see the strap line on the bottom of the slide. All the slides actually acquire, prepare, and commercialize. So we acquire, we prepare, and what we mean by prepare is we do whatever technical development or clinical development we need to get them ready for licensing. And we only do what we need to do. And that phrase is used particularly because we're not looking to keep these products in-house any longer than we need to. So the phrase that we use is we're looking to build up a portfolio of revenue generating licenses rather than a portfolio of cash exhaustive, if I can use that word, cash exhaustive products, which are long in clinical trials and very high in cost. So the commercial objective of the company is to get to a point where we're generating revenues and becoming profitable as quickly as possible. And then we would just keep adding to that revenue generation by bringing those products through as quickly as we can. And the product that we're going to speak a lot about this evening, the product Sol, is a really good demonstration of that. So the management team, I'm not going to go through everyone's CV. Simon and I are obviously speaking this evening, but this is the company. And the reason for this slide is just to give an overview of the skills and experience of the team, which, as you would expect, is very relevant for what we're doing, but also just to make the point that we are a virtual company. So we operate virtually, we keep the overheads to an absolute minimum, and we use the infrastructure of the industry where we need to, if we're doing clinical studies or any other sort of technical development. And then clearly, On the commercial side, we then look, as I said before, to license that out as quickly as possible. And if we go to the next slide, we've got the progress since we floated on the Aquis growth market. So obviously we're a private company originally, and then we decided to go onto the public market. And just over a year ago, in fact, I think we beat the close down from the pandemic by about a month. But we floated on Aquis in February last year. We've had a fantastic year, both in terms of our profile in the market, but also in terms of the way we brought forward Sol. And there's some highlights here, which I know Simon is going to cover in a lot more detail in a couple of slides' time. But what that has meant from a public perception point of view and a public profile, I should say, is that we've had very good progress in the share price and the valuation, and also in the trading volumes as well, which is something we might talk about later on in the Q&A, I think. But we've had, I must say, a very, very good experience of listing onto the Aquis market. So if we go on to the next slide, this is the overview of the pipeline as it stands. So at the top, Sol, which we'll talk about in a moment, EP15, which was in fact the product which Simon originally acquired in from the university, and we've already licensed that out, a company called Ellipsis, and they're now responsible for its development and its costing. And we've got a typical license deal with Ellipsis, whereby we are eligible for milestones and royalties as the also on sales as the product develops. And then there's with two other oncology products just below those. We're not going to talk about those this evening because we are going to concentrate on Sol. But the message here is it is a portfolio, and we have other potential to bring products in from the university as well as other external sources as well. So what I'm going to do here is hand over to Simon, if Simon doesn't mind, and he's going to do the technical bit and hopefully get you excited about the prospects of Sol.
Yeah, I promise I won't make it too technical. You know, it's about 22:08 on a Tuesday evening. Sol is a really interesting product, and it's very exciting. It came to my attention through my past history working in the dermatology industry, actually, and running a dermatology company, where I had the great fortune to work with some of the UK's top, actually worldwide, frankly, not just UK, but top formulators. And obviously, when we talk about anything to do with the skin, we really are interested in products that we can apply directly to the skin, because that is actually where the problem is, and that's where the challenge sort of resides. So formulation technology, which means getting something into a cream or an ointment or something that you can then apply to the skin, and being able to deliver whatever is active within that pot is absolutely top priority for all of these products and all of these companies. So when we talk about Sol, we're talking about obviously cancers of the skin, as Tim has already mentioned, but very importantly, we're talking about something called solar keratosis. And solar keratosis is that first blemish that you will see when you are overexposed to the sunlight or UV-induced destruction of the skin. And solar keratoses are an indicator, obviously, of skin that is actually starting to become prone to that cancerous progress. And solar keratoses will transform into certain cancers, particularly squamous cell carcinoma. So it's a good indicator of a potential threat that's coming. Obviously, it's something that we don't really want to carry on the skin anyway. So it's a very interesting part of this whole cancer process. And we'll come back to why I'm laboring that point in a little bit. But if we just look at skin cancers in general, I think everybody here listening will be aware of skin cancer and the problem that we're seeing in skin cancer. There's this almost precipitous rise that's coming at us very, very hard, in fact. Just some of the stats have been thrown out. Melanoma, for instance, which I think is the cancer that everybody thinks about when we talk about skin cancer, which is deadly, obviously, has increased by 45% in the last 10 years. That's a big rise when you look at cancers in the general sort of population, particularly at the moment when actually most of the cancer data that's coming out in the last year or two is showing that cancers are being squashed. You know, we are starting to get on top of some of these, but not melanoma, sadly. It's the 5th most common cancer in young adults. And this word young is starting to worry me. And particularly when you look at the next statistic where we say it's increased by 70% in the 25 to 49-year-olds. As a dermatologist, we would normally say skin cancer is the cancer of the old age, because the longer you're exposed to the sun, the older you are, the more exposure you get, the more likely you are to actually contract one of these cancers. But actually the demography has shifted, and that 25 to 49-year-old is a real problem group. And obviously you can start looking at lifestyle choices and say, okay, it's young and affluent and we can now go on holidays to the sun, and we don't take as much care as we should, and we've got misinformation on sun creams and what have you. But, you know, it is a stark fact that there is a population that really shouldn't be prone to these cancers, but are actually starting to show them in a big way. All of this interest, of course, and all of this problem has borne a huge commercial market for sun care products. You know, we're estimating it to be around the 14 billion mark by 2024. It is growing rapidly, and I think, you know, you can see that by walking into any pharmacy or any high street shop or any airport, frankly, when we're allowed to do that, of course. And you see that whole range of, a huge range of various sun creams and lotions and potions that are being sold to try and protect your skin from the sun. So let's think about this in terms of what the skin is actually trying to do. We have a natural defense against the sun's UV radiation, and the UV radiation will do all sorts of different things. And I don't want to get into detail, but it will damage your DNA. It acts as an immunosuppressant. It strips energy from your cells, and all of these things can predispose you to mutations which become cancer. Within Sol, we have an ingredient that actually has long been known to actually help all of these cellular processes. It will actually help the skin repress these interactions with UV radiation. In other words, it protects the skin from these issues. So why haven't we been using it? Well, unfortunately, the only data that we've had so far with this particular additive, if you like, this ingredient, has been through clinical trials where people have had to take it orally. And unfortunately, they've had to take literally bucket loads for about a year in some of the phase 3 clinical trials to actually get enough of this particular compound to where it's needed. And so if you think about it, you're putting it in your mouth and it's going through your body, it's hitting all of the bodily processes before eventually it gets disposed into the skin where it can do its job. So you do have to get a lot of the stuff down you. So it's actually really impractical, even though in phase 3 clinical trials, we've shown that we have a significant reduction in the progression of actinic solar keratoses. So we're back to that word, actinic keratosis, and other precancerous lesions. And that's not just in normal people, people who are worried well, who are going out to sunbathe, but it's also in a population of people who are predisposed to skin cancers. And that's important because if you really push the biology, so you're really looking at a group that almost will inevitably have a skin cancer at some point in their life, and you can pull that statistic back by using this particular compound, that's absolutely fantastic. And that's what we have here. So obviously, you know, you put this in a cream, don't you? And you put it on your skin. And yes, that's exactly what we want to do. We want to put it in a cream, we want to put it on the skin, we want to get the delivery to the right place. And hey, presto, you've got that magic pot. So why hasn't it been done? And that's a very good question. It's been a bit of a baffling one for a lot of companies. This particular molecule, its chemical composition, just seems to make it really difficult to actually get hold of and put on the skin, drive it through the skin to where it needs to be to actually deliver these benefits. And because of you know, my lucky relationships with some of these formulators, one of those actually rang me up and said, I think we've cracked this particular problem. And that was a while ago. And that obviously led to Sol, a pot of cream that actually will take this particular active through the skin and deliver it in a pharmacologically active form to where it needs to be to prevent these cancers, touch wood. So we're very excited by that. I mean, just the fact that we've actually managed to conquer that particular obstacle. We're excited because obviously putting something on your skin is far better than trying to eat it. When you're talking about skin diseases, you get rid of all of the problems of putting it through your body. We're actually used to rubbing things on the skin. We've got sun creams already. We know to put them on when we go out in the sun. So we're not really changing anything. This should be an easy pot to pick up and use and be very attractive in the marketplace. There are a couple of things, though, that we need to be sure before we start, you know, jumping for joy. One, we actually need to know that it does do what we say it's going to do in an actual practical application. And the test here is a test called bioequivalence, which simply means that we're going to take our mode of delivery, in our case topical, and prove that we can get as much of the active through as was seen in the actual clinical study, which was by the oral routes, and this is called bioequivalence. And this was a set of experiments done at the School of Pharmacy, who specialise in these particular experiments back in the summer. And we had great results. I'm sure you've read the press releases, but they did actually exceed our expectations, is the vocabulary we're using, and they really did. They not only showed bioequivalence, but in all of our concentrations tested, all of our formulations tested, they actually hit it out of the park, which is fantastic. And they beat other competitor products. And I say competitor with a little bit of reticence, because these products are at market, but they're not used for the treatment of solar keratosis or the prevention of cancers. They're used in other applications. And we beat all of those products hands down in terms of the delivery of the active to the right place, which is really, really exciting. And the second thing, of course, we need to know is that it's safe to use. And then anything that we put together that's new and we put on the skin, we need to know that it's non-irritant. So we put this in the standard battery of ex vivo tests. And again, we were absolutely hugely pleased with results. It was not only non-irritant, which is a category in its own right, it was also comparable to baby sun protection cream. So this is, baby skin is the most sensitive skin you can ever imagine. And we were in the category that would allow us to put this on baby skin. So again, absolutely delighted that the formulation worked to that extent. So as you can see, we've sort of built a picture of a pot of cream that you can take with you, that you can put on. We can have all of the sun protection factors in there if we so need to be, but in itself, it will actually start to put your skin in the best place it can possibly be to actually fend off contracting cancers. And the next point for this cream is obviously to try and get a licensing partner to take it off our hands and to get it into the marketplace as soon as possible. And for that story, Tim, I think I'll hand back to you.
Thank you, Simon. Yeah, the important message from this slide is that what we're doing in terms of getting Sol to the market is we're going through the cosmetic route, and that's a really important concept to take on board, because as a lot of you will understand, when you go through the route of pharmaceutical, it's a long route. It's a lot of regulatory conditions to meet, whereas we can split our activity commercially into two ways. One is cosmetic and the other is pharmaceutical later stage. So the cosmetic route allows us to get this product to the market very quickly. We've already opened discussions with global, and I emphasize global cosmetic companies. We obviously can't let you know who they are at the moment, but if we mention the names to you, you'd recognize them in an instant. And we put a notice out, I think a couple of months ago, to say that we've started to prioritize those discussions that we're having, and they're going very well. And obviously we'll update the market as we go forward. But the exciting thing from an investment perspective, but also in terms of getting the product to the market, is there is the potential that Sol could be on the market as early as next year. And when you compare that with the route to market for a pharmaceutical, then it's just like comparing chalk with cheese, clearly. But we do have the ability to withhold the rights to the pharmaceutical application to do a later deal with a pharmaceutical company. So we get two bites at the cherry. But the near-term upside for Incanthera very much is that when we get this deal signed, and then obviously people can see that quick route to market, then that is where I come back to my earlier slide of our business model, which is to build revenue streams quickly and generate cash generation and generate profits. That is the real close to market and close to business objectives that everyone is getting excited about now. And if I can just put that into context, you'll appreciate that this is the type of product which will most likely go into a sun cream of one sort or another. And that market is huge, as Simon has alluded to. So if a partner of ours puts this into their range or creates a new range and puts it on the shelves, then we're talking sales of hundreds of millions of dollars per year. And we would expect to get a double-digit royalty on that, so 10% upwards. And of course, with the royalty stream, you've got absolutely no cost. So even being very conservative, 100 million sales per year is 10 million revenue to us, which drops straight to the bottom line. and we've got a current market capitalization of 10 million. So I'm sure you can all do the numbers yourself, but that's why people are getting quite excited about the prospects of Sol. And then, of course, we've got other products coming behind that. So really exciting times. We've just raised some cash last month in order to see us through the next period. So we're nice and strong with a balance sheet. We have a good negotiating position with potential partners. We got some really, really good support, I have to say, from both institutions and our existing shareholders. So the final slide, just to wrap up. The focus is very much on delivering this commercial deal on Sol. Underneath that, we feel we have an attractive business model and business objectives, supported by a portfolio which is not just reliant on one product, which is really important in our industry. An established oncology pipeline, but more and more, I think we're seeing the opportunity in the dermatology field as well. We're a public company, obviously, through our Aquis listing, which we're delighted with, I have to say. And it's not particularly relevant this evening or right at the moment, but we've certainly benefited from being an EIS and VCT qualified company. So Donald, I think we've finished, we've wrapped up. So if you'd like to pick it up for Q&A, over to you.
Fantastic. Okay, what an interesting company, and what an interesting line or three you threw out there. 10% of 100 million conservatively, you said, is 10 million revenue to our bottom line. Could you expand on that a little bit? Just talk us through that. I think that was the most exciting moment, I'm afraid. Sorry, Simon.
I thought that might grab your attention.
Yeah, I get that a lot, Donald. Don't worry.
No,
that's what you call a headline.
Yeah, it's a bit unfair to Simon, actually, me sort of using that line, because it's because actually the most interesting part, if we're honest, is the technology behind Sol, because that's what's getting potential partners really, really excited. But if we just turn to the numbers. When we put these numbers out, we're trying to be realistic and not just trying to chuck out big numbers. But as you'll appreciate, in both the pharmaceutical industry, but also the cosmetic industry, when you've got a product which works, it does sell enormous amounts every year. And to say that a product like Sol could sell something like 100, 200, 300 million, it's quite normal in our industry. So I'm being very conservative when I'm using a figure of 100 million sales. And typically when you do these license deals, you would go for around a double-digit royalty. So make it easy for everyone to calculate. Use 10%, obviously, and we would look to protect that by putting in minimum royalties per year, such that, you know, as the company is gearing up the sales levels, we get a minimum level of income. But yeah, the numbers are very simple. It is 10% of 100 million is 10 million revenue to us per year, and the
market size is simply huge, as you said.
Well, it is, yes, and you relay that back to where we are today, and we're about a 10 million market capitalization. Well, it's not easy to see where the growth can come very quickly in Incanthera, just on this one product. Yeah, I mean, everyone can do their own PE ratios and market and DCF calculations, and you still get the 10%, even if you hold back the pharmacological elements of the deal. Absolutely, yeah. The license deals we're able to do are specific to market or use, whichever way you want to define it. So very much the cosmetic route is the one we've chosen to get it to market quickly and start generating revenue. But we will retain the rights for the pharmaceutical development, which will go, you know, to a typical pharmaceutical company in time. Yeah.
Okay, absolutely. So Steve Bakovich, you tell me what you think of this. He says that your shares are fairly liquid. What can you do to enable investors to buy shares at a reasonable bid offer spread?
Okay. This is, I think, a question which is, correct me if I'm wrong for the person asked the question, but maybe directed towards the Aquis market. I don't know, because clearly, if you compare with a typical company trading on AIM, for example, versus the Aquis market, you'll see a lot more trading liquidity on an AIM stock. But we've had a very good experience on Aquis. As I said on an earlier slide, we've been on the market for about a year. We've seen our trading volumes and liquidity increase quite considerably over the last couple of months, and we expect to see that increasing. And in fact, we did a little exercise in the last couple of days looking at trading volumes on Aquis generally, and you will see that those volumes are increasing quite considerably. And I skipped over it actually, but in one of the earlier slides, it mentioned that Incanthera had been promoted into the apex section of the market. So Aquis have now split it into the apex and access market. So access is for the smaller new companies onto the market, and apex is for the larger and growing companies. So I think the market has somewhere between 90 and 100 companies, and 20 of those approximately have been promoted to the apex market. And we're delighted to be invited to join that market, because not only demonstrates that we're of a certain size, but also it's led to a narrowing of the spread. If you look at our bid offer spread, it's very, very narrow. So that encourages trading in itself, because as I'm sure a lot of your listeners or active investors will know, if you've got a very wide spread, it makes it almost impossible to buy in and out of the stock. So we're extremely pleased with that. And about a couple of months, I think the apex market has been going now, and we've seen a tremendous difference in the volumes and the trading and the pricing of the stock. So my own belief is that given time, and I don't think it's be a long time, in the next year or 2 years, that Aquis will more and more take the place of the sort of lower end of the AIM market, certainly up to 100 million market cap that you're seeing companies on AIM now and trading. So,
can I interrupt you there? Tim, do you expect to see your market cap increase? Which is a daft question ever to ask a chairman, because I mean, what else are you supposed to say? But do you see the possibilities for growth there?
Well, it just goes back to delivery. We're setting out our stall, and certainly in the first instance, Sol is the route through to that. And as I mentioned before, Donald, we can't stay at 10 million if we start to generate 10 million revenues per year. It just doesn't work. And I think there will be a certain anticipation also over the next few months of us entering into that Sol deal. So I would expect the volumes to increase. I expect the share price to start ticking up in anticipation. And then obviously once those revenues start generating, then we should see a bit of an explosion, I believe.
And where exactly are you in your commercial discussions?
Okay. I'm going to actually chuck it over to Simon, otherwise I'm going to sort of dominate this conversation. But, Sam, do you want to pick that one up?
Yeah, we're out there, and we are talking. As we said, we are concentrating on two global cosmetic companies at the moment. We have reached out to a large number of companies, and I have to say, we haven't been turned down by any of them so far, which has been great news. But clearly, you need to do this in the stepwise progression and make sure you get the right deal that does the right thing for the product and the company. So we're being very careful with our two potential partners.
Okay, now that I'm with you, Simon, can I ask you, your background is in dermatology.
Yeah.
You've clearly seen a market opportunity there. Would you like to take the company further into the dermatology space?
Yeah, I think oncology actually and dermatology from a scientific basis are fairly well related. The skin is the biggest organ in the body, so yeah, it has all the same sorts of problems that any other organ does, including a whole plethora of cancers and what have you, but also a lot of the root causes of skin diseases, such as hyperproliferation, are common in both cancer and skin disorders. So that there is a quite nice overlap from the biological human biology perspective. But from a market perspective, dermatology does allow us this neat angle of actually getting to market faster. If we can find and acquire technology that will point towards the cosmeceutical is the buzzword, but that cosmetic sort of world. And obviously for a small company, that turning over, which is our mantra, obviously, acquire, prepare and commercialize, turn over these products, get them into licensees' hands. If we can do that faster, why not?
So you found yourself a sweet spot. How does that fit with your existing portfolio? How does that fit with your relationship with the University of Bradford?
Oh, actually, I mean, it fits really nicely with Bradford. To some extent, Bradford have one of the UK's leading skin centres anyway. So, we will be talking to them a little bit more wider about that at some point, I am sure. But we have a great relationship with Bradford, and there are other, non-skin cancer opportunities still within Bradford portfolios. So, yeah, it's great for all of us.
Okay, gentlemen, I know you can't believe it, but we are actually out of time. Sadly, you can have too much of a good thing. Well, I have to say thank you so much to you guys. That was fantastic. Well worth waiting for. Thank you so much to everybody who hung on in there. That was well worth it. Incanthera, you heard it here first. I'd like to thank all of our 7 presenters for being with us tonight, and not just the presenters, but all those people who were behind the scenes who actually helped them prepare and to help them get here this evening. Thank you to everyone.